This is an RNZ podcast.
They say it takes a village to raise a child. I'm Catherine Ryan, and here we draw on my conversations with experts on 9 to Noon to help you navigate family life. And now to parenting and how parents can develop their children as thinkers, listeners, problem solvers, learners and individuals, taking responsibility for their actions. Our guest is teacher, author, public speaker and chief executive of Spectrum Education, Karen Tui-Boys, who says it's very simple. Show children how by modelling your own behaviour. Karen, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm smiling because often it's a shock when you see your own behaviour come back at you having modelled inappropriate behaviour. This can cut both ways.
Isn't that one of the worst parts of being a parent, seeing your own behaviour reflected back?
We're looking to do this in a positive way today.
Of course.
And we're going to embrace what kind of knowledge about human interaction. The idea that we tend to model and we tend to mirror even what is displayed to us. What do we know about this?
Well, neuroscientists about 20 years ago discovered we have mirror neurons. And so they're special parts, neurons in the brain that actually cause us to mirror the behaviour we see, which is really important when we're babies because we need to mirror behaviours. We mirror what people say, we mirror what people do, because that's how we learn. And the wonderful example is when a parent is feeding a baby and you push the spoon over to the baby, but the parent opens their mouth and the baby opens their mouth. So it's that whole mirroring which is really important for learning.
There's lots and lots of examples of this. We were just saying often adults we will mirror facial expressions. So
Correct.
If someone does something unusual with their face, I find myself doing it too. We talked about how when someone has a frog in the throat, you'll often try and clear it for them. Do we know what that's about? Is it some kind of tribal endorsement of people? Or
Well,
what?
neuroscientists aren't exactly sure. Perhaps it's part of feeling like we belong. Perhaps it's part of empathy. They're really not exactly sure. I know that my husband yawned this morning and I yawned too, but I wasn't even feeling tired. And I'm like, why am I yawning? I said to him, stop that. So it is something that we do and it's almost automatic, but they're not exactly sure why.
Unless there's something in the brain that is triggered by seeing the behaviour. And
Well, that
somehow
would be the mirror
connects.
neuron. It's triggered.
The mirror neuron. Yeah.
Have you ever been out for coffee with a friend and you noticed you're both scratching your head,
Yep.
or you're both leaning in the same way?
Yeah.
That's actually
I'm
about
doing it
rapport.
right now.
Yes.
Or you open your eyes wide and the person looking at you opens their eyes wide. It's actually quite
Or
creepy
just
now that you
smile
mention
at somebody
that.
when you walk down the street randomly and they smile back.
Sure. When children are younger, is it often the physical stuff that will be mirrored? We're talking about going further into actual behaviours and gestures, which is what I'm doing right now. But when they're younger, it often is mum smiles, so I smile back, or mum did this activity, or dad did this activity, so I'll go and do this.
Yes.
And so straight out learning by doing.
I think so. And how many parents show their children how to crawl? we actually show them what we want to do. So I think that's part of these mirror neurons for us to copy what we see. Absolutely. And first of all, that's going to happen on a visual level of what we see. And then what they hear, we say mama, da to children because that's what we want them to say. So they copy.
When we get into behaviour, it gets a little bit more nuanced. Shall we begin with listening? You want your child to listen.
Yes.
How well do you model?
Exactly. There is some fascinating research that shows that children who are listened to will be good listeners. So, and one of the areas that this is often found is when people have dinner together. So, and this is a dying art. I don't know if it's an art. It's a dying thing that happens, that families sit around the dinner table and eat together. Without the TV on, without the cell phones, without any distractions. And then the conversation happens. So then they can have conversations and ask questions and model and practice listening to one another. And my children still will say, "You're not listening to me," when the conversation starts to get a bit heated because everyone's trying to go in over top of each other. But even as teenagers, that's a really important modelling of what do we do in that situation.
including pausing, looking, clearly receiving the information. And this is a really important one because this is giving them skills that will help them navigate adult relationships and confront difficult things. But I don't know about your situation. I'm part of a very large family and we all grew up talking over the top of each other all the time. And actually you were still listening. It's quite,
Correct.
It is, and I'm guilty of this constantly now, in understanding that for other people, talking and listening at the same time is not normal. And when you start talking, they stop. So these are things we will learn when we're young, and we can either model good examples or we can model, less optimal examples.
Yes.
So the dinner table's a good one. Or just talking to your child at all, the temptation is, number one, to finish their sentence or tell them what to say. That's one issue. Let's zero in on that.
Yeah.
Let them say what they want to say, not what you want them to say.
Correct.
And we can be guilty of this.
So the three parts of great listening is to pause, to paraphrase, and then to probe. And so the pause is the important part to start with, is to stop and just listen. And listen for understanding rather than listen to reply. So that's an interesting nuance, isn't it? We're not going to say,
you're lining up your next statement rather than listening.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
And they can see you lining up your next statement because your lips are getting ready to move.
Or your body language is showing, hurry up because I'm ready to say what I need to say. Yes. So the pausing, and so pause when a child asks a question, pause to think about the answer, even if you know it, to show them that you're being thoughtful about what you're going to say. Pause when you ask them a question and wait for their response rather than pushing for a fast response. So there's many times we can model that pausing for our children, but pausing to listen.
Yes, so that is one. It's a different matter slightly, isn't it, also from inserting what you wish they'd said to what they had said, and that's almost a higher level skill. That's actually not just giving them time to speak, but to be prepared to hear what they're saying rather than replacing it, as I said, with what you wish they'd said.
Correct. And that's the second stage of the paraphrase, to be able to say, so what I understand you're saying is, so are you feeling really upset about this? And naming the emotion that your child might be feeling, but actually trying to understand where they're coming from. You might not necessarily agree, and that's the great thing about being a good listener. You don't have to agree with what the person is saying, and that's part of the empathy as well. You just want to be able to understand and show them that you understand their point of view.
And that can be hard because you automatically want to come back with what you believe is the right way for this to proceed. But what you're doing is inviting that classic, you're not listening to me, because you probably aren't.
And we're busy too as parents.
I understand.
I think that's also part of the challenge. And so taking that time to show that you're valuable, because when somebody truly listens to you, it shows great respect.
You've got a magnificent list for dinner table questions. I wonder if we should pause on that now, seeing we started on it, because what is it that can become very useful as a result of developing this and quite early? You can move from I'm listening to what you've said to broadening the conversation or to starting conversations that might be important.
Absolutely. The number one question parents ask children who are at school is, what did you do at school today? And of course, the number one response is
Not
nothing.
Much.
I've worked in 20 countries now with parents and students, and they all do nothing every day. It's the same curriculum. So it's not a good question to ask. So you want to broaden that by asking more fun questions. I used to say to my daughter when she came home, did anyone throw up today? And she'd look at me and go, no, Mum. But it was like, it would push her out of her boundaries of what she thought I was going to say. And so it would open up a conversation. So asking questions that don't have a right or wrong answer. Would you rather be a lamp or would you rather be a traffic light? And
wouldn't you get, Mum, it's naff?
Maybe. It depends what you've set up. In my family, we started with, what's your favourite part of the day? And we'd go around the table and talk about that. And then as my children got older, we started talking about what positive difference did you make in the world today or see somebody make? And it might be just, I smiled at somebody, or my daughter used to say, I stopped at the pedestrian crossing and waved at the person who was letting me across, or I picked up some rubbish on the ground and put it in the rubbish bin. So, and then we moved to, what are you grateful for? Because there was a period of time I felt like they were just being ungrateful for what they had and what this amazing place they live. So all these questions sort of morphed. So yes, I have a list of about 87 questions, which are just different challenging questions that you might ask.
The other thing is, and this again is a function of being busy and a lot of things needing to happen, is often they're very short-term questions. You know, what do you need to take to school tomorrow? Or, you know, what happened today? Or what day is X happening? But asking those big, broad questions that, whether at the moment at the dinner table or later, actually digs a little bit deeper into what's going on with them. Have you got some of those in your list as well? You know, bigger life questions.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you just want, you know, what do you want to do when you grow up? I mean, that's a question kids get asked all the time, and they don't know because there's so many choices and the world will probably look very different. But what do you love doing now, and how could you use that to make a difference in the world?
What would your job look like if you could do anything you wanted to do when you left school?
Yeah.
And from that, you can get, instead of specific functional conversations, you can get more of a sense of what's going on between the ears. So look, listening is one. Big challenge, that one. But your point is they will learn these behaviours in part, in large part, from the way you conduct yourself.
Absolutely. So they, if you want them to be good listeners, then you need to provide that time. And dinner time is a great time to do that, because I remember my daughter coming down to my office one day and being trying to tell me something, and I was busy and I was focused, and she turned to me and she stamped her foot and said, "I'll ask you at dinner." Because she knew there was going to be a time in the day where I was completely present.
That's interesting, because that might vary from household to household. There might be a parent working 4 days a week, but an afternoon where they're home and available. And if you know there's going to be a time where that kind of conversation can happen, then things can be planned. Or driving. I don't know how successful this is, because it's such a nightmare normally, isn't it? Car trips. But sometimes if there's just one parent, one kid, that can be an incredibly valuable time.
My husband and I often toss up who's going to take our son to Air Force cadets on a Wednesday night.
So they can talk instead of you two talking.
So I'm going to take him tonight. I want to have a conversation with him. Or he says, I want to take him. I want to hang out with my boy. So I think that is a good time to do it too. But also bedtime. If you have a bedtime ritual and sit on their bed and have a quick chat, and often that's where everything spills out for children.
Problem solving. Again, if you want them to be good at it, how are you modelling it? Do it my way, problem solved.
That's the one. It's a challenge.
Yep.
It's a challenge. But when our children have problems, we tend, as because we're busy, to try and rescue them and do it for them. And it's just quicker to be able to do that rather than say, what options have you got? Or go away and think about it for a minute and come back and come up with 2 solutions that you think might be useful. But that takes time. So you've got to have the time to do that. I think the problem solving is also allowing them to learn those bigger life lessons, like when they've lost something, instead of rescuing and finding it for them, say to them, well, ask questions. Where did you leave it last? What would you do with it? What were you doing with it? Or just leave them to realise that if they put something in the right place all the time, it would be more functional and easier to find.
Again, even if it's like they've got a clash coming up, it can be very quick and efficient for you to solve the issue for them, but it's got every now and then to just prompt them and let them work through it themselves.
Yes.
Time consuming as that might be.
Yeah, and ask the questions.
Yeah.
You know, what would you gain from this situation? What might you gain from that situation? And so you weigh it up.
Is there another way you can make both things happen?
Yes.
But instead of going straight to, well, if you did this and then did this, problem solved. Making mistakes. We all know people who've never made a mistake in their lives. We've often been related to them. So, how important is it, and how do you model well making mistakes well? and recovering well?
I think it's just being real and not pretending, so that as a parent that we just say, hey, I'm not sure. And I think last time I interviewed you, you asked me a question and I went, I don't know. And you said to me, but you're the parenting expert. But I actually don't know everything.
Facetious.
I know. but many people wouldn't do that and say, I don't know. So it's that ability to say to your children, I actually don't know the answer to this, or as the model, or
I did that wrong. I got that wrong last week.
Yes, I did something and I've realised I was wrong, and here's how I need to fix it. And those horrible moments for me as a parent when I've done something like yelled at my children to excess, where I've really felt guilty, instead of just wearing that guilt, when I've been ready and when I've calmed myself down, I've gone and apologised and just said, oh, I am so sorry. I was stressed, I wasn't thinking, I wasn't being empathetic. I'm sorry, that wasn't the best way for me to do that.
It's a separate category, but how to apologise, when and how, is another really important thing to teach people. People can go through life incapable of apologising, and again, you've got the chance early on in life to show them how.
Absolutely.
And it is such a stress remover, and it's such a relationship repairer to know how to apologise genuinely and well.
Absolutely.
It's
and how to accept that apology. So how to apologise, but also how to say, well, I didn't like what you did, and I accept your apology. So it's the being able to give the apology, but also being able to accept it as well.
A lot of this stuff is about higher level relationship management, but it's something else as well. If you don't feel like you can be wrong because your parents are never wrong, you can go through life BSing, frankly, and it's not going to get you very far, and it's not going to get anyone else very far. Learning that it is okay, it is healthy to be wrong and to be able to acknowledge it to yourself and to others is just so important.
Absolutely.
And it takes away the fear of being wrong.
Yes. I held a deep secret in myself for about 20 years of cheating at university, and I've publicly talked about this before. So, but I cheated because I'd had a bad mark and I didn't want my parents to know, so I cheated by copying somebody's assignment who got an A to ensure I had a pass mark. And I lived in fear all through my university that they'd find out, even on graduation day, that they were going to stop me halfway across the stage and say, you can't graduate. And it was only in my 40s that I had the courage to tell my parents, because I was so scared that they would not love me because I'd made a mistake. And so I think it's really important for us to be able to say to our children and show them that we're human, and that things do go wrong, and we do we make mistakes.
How often is a relationship ruined or ended because someone simply doesn't know how to fix something they've done that's wrong?
Absolutely.
It's bad enough it may not be able to be mended, but often it's a simple thing. A friend's falling out, or you made an absolute clown of yourself, intoxicated at some event.
Yes.
And it's easier to actually end that engagement or that relationship than to simply say, that was a cluster, here's what's going on, I am so sorry, forgive me.
Absolutely. So being able to apologise and just
I can
move
think
on.
of an elderly relative whose life wisdoms were communicated once along the lines of, you never admit you're wrong and you never say you're sorry. And we laugh about it.
Yes.
But how sad is that?
That is very sad.
Okay, so these are some of the relationship things, problem solving, making mistakes. What other positive things can you model with some confidence that they will be picked up on, that you should be thinking about?
Yeah. So if you want your child to be a great learner, you need to be modelling learning. What are you learning right now, and showing them that you're being a learner? So are you learning to play the guitar? Are you learning to back a trailer? Are you learning to cook a new meal? So as a parent, really important to show your children that you are still learning, because lifelong learning is going to be the key to success for our children. So what are you still learning to do? Maybe it's learning to communicate. Maybe it is learning to apologise. Maybe it's learning to speak a new language. So whatever it is, show them that you're a learner, and then show them the stresses, the the challenges that you have and the failures that you make in your learning, and be able to laugh about that and model it for them.
Model a bit of short-term sacrifice for longer-term gain.
Correct.
To encourage them to be a thinker. This is an interesting one. And how can you go about that again as a parent? You sort of think you either come out that way or you don't. But how can you model them to pause and to really go through the processes of considering things deeply?
Well, I think it's that probing of those, asking those questions. When my children say it's really weird stuff, I'm like clarifying language. When you say weird, what do you mean about weird, and what is stuff? So I'm helping them be really clear on their language and use good language. I'm helping them to understand their thought process a little bit more. So when you said you had a really fun time, what about that was fun? So I'm delving a little deeper into the experience, and I'm not doing this every time I speak to my children, I need to say, because it would just be, but at those times it's like, tell me a little bit more about that. And so I try and be genuinely interested and get them to think a little deeper than, oh, it was just good.
You can also model changing your mind. I used to think X and I've thought it through and now I think Y. Again, some people will hold on to their argument or their case or their position on something from 5 years ago for dear life.
Well, we have a need as humans to be right.
We can live and learn.
Yes, correct.
And we can change, and the ability to change your mind and say, look, yes, I said that yesterday, but actually I've thought through what you've said and I've completely changed my position. This again is like a maturing way of being in some ways that you can model. You mentioned the learned helplessness or the temptation sometimes to do everything for someone, and this isn't necessarily you as a parent, it might be happening somewhere else in the family, you know, and how can you help people see that that's not necessarily helping someone develop?
When my daughter was born, my son was 2.5 years older, so he was the proud big brother. I have to say at 16 and 19 now, it's more like get out of my room. But when she was born, he was so proud. He fed her, he dressed her, he wanted to bathe her. He did everything for her. He tied her shoelaces, and when she started to talk, he talked to her. He'd say she's thirsty. He'd say everything. So she learned to be a little bit more learned helpless because she didn't have to do it. She knew Big Brother would. So after a while, when I started to be more aware of this, I found a little phrase that I love, and it says this: if you say it for me, if you write it for me, if you draw it for me, all I learn is that you are better than me. And so I put that on the fridge. And I got her to say it, and I got him to say it. And it was wonderful because he started to realise, oh, I'm just trying to prove that I'm better. I'm superior because I know how to do it. And she went, no, I can't learn if you do it for me. So it became the conversation that happened in our household. So being able, and that's true for us as parents, you know, if we're doing it for them, if we're saying it for them, all they're learning is that we're better than they are.
Also, you can even acknowledge these things in yourself, and that you're never going to be perfect, but if you can sort of see the moments when they're happening, again, you can admit it, laugh about it, have some acceptance over it, and then gradually, bit by bit, do things a little bit differently. You just made me think of another situation of a youngest child in a very large family, and it was funny because at gatherings people would ask, this is not me by the way, but people would ask her a question and she wouldn't answer because she's waiting for her mother to answer,
Yes.
it for her.
Yeah.
And look, it's kind of sweet and funny, but seriously,
Yes.
I've observed it happening.
Absolutely.
Like pile in, oh, she's doing X, or she thinks X. It's
I see it a lot.
Yeah.
I see that a lot with parents answering, or older siblings answering, or...
But there'd be this silence. If the parent wasn't around, there was this silence because she didn't know how to do it. But again, she turned out fine. We don't need to get too self-flagellating about this. It's just a little bit of awareness, right?
Yes. So, and it's just being aware that if you see a deficiency, if that's the right word, or if you see it's an area where your child isn't doing well or isn't being able to think well, it's like, how do I model that? How do I show them that I can do that? Or what do I need to learn to help them learn to do that?
Thank you, Karen. Karen Boyes, Spectrum Education.